Well, hello everyone. I hope you're having a fantastic day and welcome back to another episode here on the channel where I have the opportunity to help you to improve your English comprehension, vocabulary, and your English fluency. So this will be a podcast episode. If you are watching on YouTube or if someone shared this with you and you do not know, you can watch this podcast on my YouTube channel and you will see the words on the screen, and you can use these words to enhance your English learning experience. I will speak slowly. At least I'll plan to speak slowly because sometimes I get a little excited in these conversations, but when I speak slowly, it is so you can shadow me and you can learn words that you may be unfamiliar with and become more confident in your English speaking. If I didn't say it, my name is Jay and I teach English in sort of a different way here on YouTube. You can check out the links to my playlist down in the description to get a better understanding of my style of teaching that so many of you like. Now, today, I want to talk about on this episode about words that you should be familiar with when it comes to having medical surgery. Of course, you can have surgery on different parts of your body, but I thought this topic would be quite unique because my mother-in-law has surgery scheduled later this week. She has to have a procedure where one of her muscles must be stapled back in place. She is an elderly woman, and so her body is changing and she has to have surgery. And so I thought this would be a great opportunity to talk about it and teach you some words that you can learn if you do not know them. So let's start out with a couple of questions. Have you ever wondered what it feels like to fall asleep instantly? I know when you're tired, you fall asleep. When you come home from work, you fall asleep. Each day, you have to allow your body to rest, so we go to sleep. But when you have surgery, the doctors and nurses do something to put your lights out. Putting your lights out is a way that we describe putting someone to sleep or making them unconscious. If someone said they were going to make a tiny cut in your body, would you be nervous, or would you not be afraid and you would be courageous and allow them to cut on you? This is something that also happens in surgery, and we'll talk about that. Do you think certain people recover from surgery faster because they have more money? I don't. I think everyone's body is different, and we all have a different recovery rate. So these three questions actually have to do with the vocabulary words that I'm going to teach you. The first one is anesthesia. Anesthesia. So anesthesia is medicine or a drug that makes you sleep so you don't feel pain when you're being operated on. Thankfully, I have never had surgery, but I have had dental surgery. And I do not like having to have anesthesia where they numb my gums. It is something that I do not look forward to. You know, when I was younger, the procedures have changed, but I remember when I was younger, the dentist would have a needle that they bring and they would inject the anesthesia, which is called Novocaine, into my gums before they would drill on the teeth in my mouth. And so I had to have a filling a month or so ago, and they started out by just rubbing anesthesia on my gums, and then he started to work on my teeth, and I still felt some pain. So they took a needle, and they pushed the needle into my top gum, and you can just feel the Novocaine entering your mouth, and it made my whole left side completely numb. I didn't fall asleep, but the anesthesia numbed my mouth so I would not feel the pain. At one point, they began to drill, and I jumped back because I could feel the pain, and they brought the needle out again and injected some more anesthesia. Another definition of anesthesia is a way to keep your body from hurting while your body is being operated on. Okay? Now, it has been said that some people call anesthesia a magic pill or giving you a magic nap. You know, my son had his not his tonsils, but his wisdom teeth removed, and they gave him anesthesia that knocked him out. And I have pictures and video. It's funny after the fact, but they knocked him unconscious and worked on his mouth, cut his gums open, and pulled out his wisdom teeth. So that was an experience for him that we shall never, ever forget. Now, some words that are synonymous with anesthesia are pain blockers, numbing medicine, or one that I use pretty often, a sedative. So all of these words are similar to anesthesia. They help you not to feel any pain. On the other hand, the opposite of anesthesia is something that causes you to be alert, awake, or you feel whatever is happening to you. Those are antonyms. So you actually have some illegal drugs that people take, and it enhances their feelings. I have never taken ecstasy, but I've heard that it enhances a person's feelings. From the movies I've watched, they say cocaine makes a person more alert. It doesn't cause them to go to sleep. It may numb pain, but they are more alert. And some people, from what I've seen in movies, they become more paranoid. Okay? Now, anesthesia should not be confused with insomnia. Insomnia is when a person can't go to sleep. Anesthesia causes a person to go to sleep. So when a person has insomnia, they may stay up for hours on end because they can't go to sleep. They need a sedative. Another word that is usually confused with anesthesia is antibiotic. An antibiotic is something that fights infection. So if a person gets cut or has an accident that makes a cut on them, you may go to the store or a doctor may prescribe an antibiotic to help fight the germs or infections that may try to attack your body. So, here are a couple of sentences that you can use to practice the word anesthesia. The doctor gave Maria anesthesia before pulling her tooth. Without anesthesia, surgery would be very painful. I remember in some movies they didn't have anesthesia because of the time that they were living. Some people used opium to numb the body. But they would give a person a piece of wood or something to bite down on as they worked on their body. Another sentence: some people wake up slowly after anesthesia. Okay, I remember my mother had her foot operated on, and she had anesthesia, and I actually had to drive her to and from the hospital. Another sentence: the nurse explained how anesthesia works. And so my mother-in-law last week had to go to the anesthesiologist, and they had to explain the effects that the anesthesia would have on her body. They actually have to tell you how to prepare your body. You can't eat certain things. You have to make sure your system is clean. You can't have any tobacco, any drugs, any alcohol, because they don't want anything to hinder the anesthesia from working properly. Kids are often scared, but anesthesia makes them feel safe and calm. When Michael Jackson's doctor used a strong anesthesia drug, it became a big news story. It showed how powerful and dangerous these medications can be if not used correctly. I remember that. They said Michael Jackson died under the care of his physician because of the anesthesia that he was given was too powerful. I don't know if that was an accident or if that was actually done on purpose. That may make a good topic for a podcast episode, talking about conspiracy theories. I just think that Michael Jackson had some property that was worth millions of dollars that someone may have wanted from him. And I just don't think it was an accident that his anesthesia was too strong and it cost him his life. But that's just my belief. Let me read you a quick story before we go on to our second vocabulary word for today's lesson. Anna needed surgery on her broken arm. She was nervous because she didn't want to feel pain. The doctor smiled and said, "Don't worry, we'll use anesthesia." As the mask touched her face, Anna counted 1, 2, 3, and suddenly she was asleep. When she woke up, the surgery was already finished. She was surprised and asked, "When are we starting?" The nurse laughed and said, "It is already done." Anna realized how powerful anesthesia was. It turned her fear into a painless dream. I've seen TikTok videos and videos on other social media platforms where people take anesthesia and they count backwards from 10 and then they're knocked out. All right, let's go to our second word, incision. So I started off today's episode asking you, how would you feel if someone cut on you? So when someone or a doctor makes a cut on your body, it's called an incision. A careful opening in the body for surgery. So my mother-in-law will have possibly an incision made in the back of her body. So they'll make a cut where they can go in and staple one of her muscles or organs in its proper position. Another definition for an incision is a slice made with a tool. I believe it's called a scalpel. It's razor sharp and it can just cut through flesh like a hot butter or like a hot knife does butter. Now, incision sounds like the word decision, but they have two different meanings, okay? They sound the same, but they mean two different things. Incision has to do with a cut. Decision has to do with a choice, okay? So you make a decision on where you would like to go on a date. The doctor makes an incision on your body. Another word that is usually confused with incision is invasion. So incision is a cut. Invasion means to attack or go in. So the bumblebees made an invasion on the kid playing near their nest. Or some people fear that aliens will plan an invasion on the planet Earth. That's amazing how that's in the news. Now, another word that is synonymous with incision, it's not similar, but it also has to do with incision. The word scar. Okay, so the incision makes the cut. Once the incision heals, it leaves a scar. Okay, so the scar is the mark that shows where the incision was made. So let me give you a few sentences that you can use to practice. The surgeon made a small incision on John's knee. Or you might say the incision must be clean in order for it to heal properly. And finally, doctors use sharp tools to make precise incisions. So a precise incision is the proper, the correct, okay? If they need to cut right here on my chest, a precise incision would be for them to cut right here. If it were not precise, they may cut over here. Okay, that's the wrong area. All right, let me read you a quick story to help you better understand the word incision. David needed surgery on his stomach. The doctor explained, "We will make a small incision, just like opening a zipper." David worried it would hurt, but after anesthesia, he felt nothing. The doctor made the incision and fixed the problem quickly. When David woke up, he looked at the bandage and said, "That's it? That tiny cut fixed everything?" The doctor nodded. The nurse nodded. David realized that sometimes big problems are solved with small incisions. Finally, I want to talk about the word procedure, a planned medical action. Of course, we've been calling it surgery. Steps that doctors follow to fix a problem, a procedure. Finally, a medical job done in order. So Doctors have to follow a certain procedure. So first they may clean their hands, then they may put on gloves, and then they clean their tools, and then they do the operation. So they have a certain order that they go in. Now, procedure and process, those are words that are similar. You can use process and procedure interchangeably. A word that's confused with procedure that you hear in surgery is prescription. So the prescription has to do with the drugs that the doctor gives you and not necessarily the procedure that happens in surgery. So you get prescriptions to help you to deal with the pain after surgery. Now, procedure is somewhat similar to the word policy. Okay, so policy has to do with rules, procedure has to do with steps that you take. So one policy may be no one can be in the operation area during surgery. That's a policy. We need you to be here 4 hours before the surgery. That is procedure. All right? Let's look at a couple of sentences using the word procedure. The doctor explained the procedure before surgery. Every procedure follows clear steps. Some procedures are quick, like removing a tooth. The hospital does many procedures each day. A safe procedure needs skilled nurses and doctors. Have you ever had a procedure done? A medical procedure, surgery? Let me know down in the comments section. Here's a simple story to help you better understand the word procedure, and then we will be finished with today's episode. Sophia needed a medical procedure for her heart. The doctor carefully explained each step so she would feel calm. On the day of the procedure, Sophia was nervous, but she trusted the team. The nurses moved quickly, everyone knowing their role. Hours later, Sophia woke up and asked, "Are we done?" The doctor smiled. Yes, it went perfectly fine. Sophia realized that a procedure isn't just about tools, it's about teamwork, planning, and care. So these are 3 words that I want you to be familiar with when it comes to surgery: anesthesia, incision, and procedure. One other word that I'm not going to spend too much time on is recovery. That is when you give your body rest and you allow your body to heal after the surgery. So my wife will have to stay at the hospital overnight to support my mother-in-law in her recovery from the surgery. Okay? So recovery is necessary because you want to give your body time to heal. You never want to rush. I remember a time to where when women had babies, they would have 6 to 8 weeks to recover. And now it's as if women have babies and the next week they are back performing normal duties that they do on a daily basis. It's so amazing how people's recovery time is so different over the years. Well, that's going to do it for today's episode. We've talked about 4 words to help you better understand surgery, anesthesia, incision, procedure, and recovery. I want to say this before I leave. Let me know, do you use Facebook? Do you use WhatsApp? I am looking for ways to keep in contact with you guys because sometimes I put lessons out that you enjoy and YouTube may not give you a notification, or you may not have the notifications turned on. But if I can start a community, I've tried email in times past, but not many of you sign up for the email list, so I didn't know if that was something you wanted to do or not. But if you prefer email, let me know. If you prefer me to start a Facebook group or maybe a WhatsApp community, let me know down in the comments section so I can better engage with you guys on your English learning journey. Well, that's going to do it for today's episode of the podcast. I hope you've had a wonderful time as I have. As always, if you have enjoyed today's lesson, be sure to share it with a friend, and I hope you join me on my next English lesson. I'll see you then.